Hi, this is Andre. I want to talk about the auto record function on the Echoplex Digital Pro. Thank you very much to Mark Oswald for commissioning this one. Auto record has to do with multiple loops in the Echoplex Digital Pro, and specifically it has to do with giving you the option of automatically recording when you enter an empty loop. So before we go any further, let's do a crash course review on multiple loops. It's controlled by this top parameter row up here, so let's go through each one of those. More loops is set to 4. This means that I'm dividing the Echoplex into 4 different loops that I can switch between. Auto record is the main thing we're talking about for this video. Its 2 settings are off and on. Makes life kind of simple, which is nice. Loop copy is off. Loop copy and auto record are kind of mutually exclusive, so we're not going to be worrying about loop copy at all. We're going to keep that turned off. Switch quantize, we're going to keep off as well. That means that every time we enter a new loop with the next loop button, we're immediately going to go there as soon as we press the button. There isn't going to be any delay or waiting period switching between a loop. Sampler style, we are going to keep set to start for the entire video. That means that every time you enter a loop that already has audio in it, you're going to replay that loop from the very beginning of the loop. Loop trigger and velocity are only having to do with MIDI, and we're not doing any MIDI, so we're going to forget about those guys. So let's start off playing a chord on the guitar. There's loop number 1. Now if I switch to loop number 2, nothing happens. That's because auto record is turned off and loop copy is turned off. So neither of these possibilities are engaged, which means that if we enter an empty loop, nothing is going to happen. Now, if I play something else and then record a new loop from scratch, that works fine. Same thing there. Loop 3, don't have anything recorded automatically, so... And loop 4. So now we've got 4 different loops. This is my fake David Torn hex revolver effect. So each of these loops is a different length, and so forth. So that's one way you can build up loops, but it takes a little while, which is not the end of the world. It just takes a little while. Let's turn auto record on now. So now what's going to happen is that as soon as we enter an empty loop, it's going to immediately start recording. Let's also talk about the next loop button, because in a case like this, next loop can double as an ending for record. So I'm going to start recording on loop 1. Then I'm going to press next loop, which is going to do 2 things at the same time. It's going to stop recording on loop 1, and it's going to put me into loop 2, which also is immediately going to start recording because we have auto record turned on. Sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. So let me set up something with my right hand so I can press with the left. Okay, so that is my open string extravaganza. This is the first loop we recorded. That's the second loop. That's the third loop and 4th loop. And again, we're able to switch immediately because switch quantize is set off. And we were able to build up all of those 4 different loops with different content in one pass because we were using next loop as an alternate ending to record and because auto record was on. Let's erase that, let's do a global reset, and let me try doing that again from scratch. So there's our first loop, second loop, third loop, that kind of idea. Now, before we keep talking about multiple loops and auto record, we're going to take a detour into something called threshold recording. This is not very widely used or discussed from what I can tell. I tend to forget that the function is there, but for cases like what we're about to do, it can be really useful. Threshold is located on the bottom parameter row in the mute column. The default setting is 0, so by default you don't really know that it's there. Threshold recording sets up a gate that you have to exceed in order for recording to begin. What does that mean? It means that if we set a value, you can go up to 8, let's set it to 4. Get out of parameters, press record, and nothing's happening. Why is nothing happening? Because we have threshold recording engaged. And that waiting state means that the EDP is waiting to hear a signal that will cross the threshold. So if I play very quietly, nothing happens. So it's going to wait until I play louder and then start recording. This can be useful in situations like mine, where I'm not using a foot pedal and I'm accessing all the functions via the front panel, and I'm also not much of a one-handed guitar player. So I'm going to use threshold recording to help me out here. We're also going to change the switch quantize parameter now. We're going to change that to loop. That means that we're going to switch to the next loop as soon as we get through the entirety of the current loop. So let's give this a shot. Hit record. Nothing's happening yet because I have not played anything that exceeds the threshold. I play quietly. Not loud enough to exceed the threshold. Let's exceed the threshold. Now I'm going to hit next loop, and it's going to wait until it gets through all of loop 1 before it makes the switch. Same thing with loop 3. Here comes loop 4. So now we've got loop 1, loop 2, and of course you could stay on any of those particular loops if you just wanted to sit on top of a particular chord for a little while. And if we turn switch quantize off, now we will immediately jump to the next loop as soon as we push next loop. And so forth. Alright, I've talked in previous multiple loop videos about the idea that auto record and loop copy are kind of mutually exclusive. Here's the reason I say that. Auto record means that when you enter an empty loop, you immediately start recording something. Loop copy means that when you enter an empty loop, you immediately start copying the loop you just left into the new empty loop that you've just arrived in. Now here's where you can kind of have both happening at the same time. Let's record an initial loop. Let's use threshold recording so that I don't have to do one-handed guitar playing. Let's record second loop. So right now we've got loops 1 and loop 2. Let's go back to loop 1. Let's say I want to copy that into loop 3. So here's what you can do. There's a quantize period, because we have switch quantize on. We have it set to loop right now. The quantize period is the period between when you press next loop and when it actually switches. So all when it says L2, or in this case L1, that's the quantize waiting period. Now, if you press multiply, during that waiting period, you can force a loop copy. So let's do that. Multiply, now we're copying loop 1 into loop 3. Even though the loop copy parameter is off, we were able to force a loop copy by pressing multiply during the switch quantize waiting state. Let's go back to loop 1. Here's loop 2. Here's loop 3, which we copied from loop 1 because we forced a loop copy. And let's record something fresh in loop 4. 2, 3, 4. So again, there's loop 1. here's loop 3. So this has been a look at the auto record parameter on the Echoplex Digital Pro. Turning it off means that you don't have auto record. When you have it on, that means that you will automatically start recording a new loop from scratch when you enter an empty loop. We also talked briefly about how you can force a loop copy even if the loop copy parameter itself is off. If you have a quantize waiting state and you press multiply during that quantize waiting state when you're waiting to switch to a new loop. Clear as mud, right? Thank you again very much to Mark Oswald for commissioning this video, and to all of you for tuning in. I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.